John Locke was an English philosopher and physician born in the United Kingdom in 1632. To this day, he is known as the most influential Enlightenment thinker in history. Throughout his life, he made major contributions to education, theology, medicine, physics, economics, and politics. This includes his famous theory of the natural rights of life, liberty, and property. His work helped inspire the American Revolution, among other major historical events. He also had great influence in the shaping of the Constitution, which has had an effect on every one of us to this day. John Locke's influence stretches beyond the areas of government and human rights, bearing impact on more than just the U.S. Constitution. His monumental steps in psychology and philosophy, studies of natural science, works in theology, world-renowned writings on government, relations to important historical figures, and brief authority over British colonies made Locke a prominent figure in the development of modern society. It is in these ways that Locke made an extremely significant contribution to the course of U.S. history.
Locke was born in 1632 in Rington, England. He excelled academically and earned a place at the prestigious University, Christ Church, Oxford. There, most of his intellectual effort was devoted to the areas of philosophy, medicine, and the natural sciences. After pursuing his own studies, he held administrative positions and taught undergraduates. Locke's involvement in science and medicine would later allow him to become acquainted with Robert Boyle, a distinguished chemist. In the following years, Locke left Oxford and joined the Royal Society as a close friend of the first Earl of Shaftesbury, a powerful British politician. As a trained physician, he would later save Shaftesbury's life in a surgical operation. Shaftesbury went on to found the Whig Party in England, restore the British monarchy, serve as the First Lord of Trade, and promote religious tolerance from his position within British government. His decisions made in his various government positions from 1661 to 1679 had varying effects on the developing British colonies within America. Locke, being credited with saving his life, was responsible for keeping him in power. Through Locke's patronage with him, Locke was granted governmental posts of authority concerning British colonies in America and the Caribbean. He held power over policies relating to these American colonies during this critical time in their development in the late 1600s. In the next decade, Locke published his most famous political work, the two treatises concerning government. In the first treatise, Locke disputes the notion of the divine right of royalty on a historical basis and distinguishes between different types of governing powers. His criticism of the monarchy's divine right to rule was an uncommon belief at the time, but it is now a widespread opinion. He wrote, quote, "Absolute monarchy is indeed inconsistent with civil society, and so can be no form of civil government at all." His thoughts on the British monarchy were later adopted by American colonists in the 1700s. The colonists' view of the monarchy was a critical factor in their Declaration of Independence from Great Britain, but this principle was carried on through the founding of our government as well. It was a component leading to the different branches of government, limited powers of the executive branch, and our system of checks and balances, all in which Locke played a major role in influencing. Locke's second treatise is referenced regularly for its focus on natural rights and the people's right to revolt. The Founding Fathers looked towards Locke's philosophy as a guide. His principles of limited government and the sovereignty of the people is prevalent within the U.S. Constitution and its recent additions, including the 10th Amendment and the system of checks and balances. He recognized that civil society exists when each citizen consents to join into a community where the government's role consists of preserving the natural rights to life, liberty, and property. The last phrase is almost identical to a line of the Declaration of Independence when it reads, "Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." As the exact words of John Locke are present, his influence is clear. Locke also wrote that if, quote, "a long train of abuses occurred at the fault of a government, the people have the duty to decide whether or not the government was abiding by its contract with its people and pursue rebellion with legitimate reasons. In the case of a tyranny, it is the people's responsibility to overthrow or abandon their government." Thomas Jefferson directly used Locke's words, "a long train of abuses," within the Declaration of Independence, also using Locke's justification for the American Revolution. This vital document in America's history is abundant in Locke's inspiration. Along with his views on government, Locke's concepts of theology and religious tolerance were ahead of his time. Within the essay concerning human understanding, as well as his various letters concerning toleration, Locke provided controversial ideas that proved to be monumental within the areas of religion and religious tolerance. The questions of whether or not a government should establish one particular religion within a state, how that might be enforced, and what the correct attitude should be towards those who resist conversion, all had been central to European politics for centuries. Locke asserted that enforcing religious conformity was outside the scope of government, as well as impossible. He promoted some degree of religious diversity and freedom of religion, concepts that are well accepted within American society today. As previously mentioned, The Founding Fathers took a lot from John Locke when drafting the Constitution, including his views on religious freedom, which became a fundamental part of the First Amendment, outlining our most basic rights. One main exception Locke made was Roman Catholicism. In his view, Catholics had a fundamental allegiance to the Pope, a foreign leader, and did not respect the sovereignty of English law, making them a threat to political stability. This view towards Roman Catholics became popular among the British and the British colonists in America. This was carried on in America for centuries, evoking discrimination towards Roman Catholic immigrants as well as preserving Protestantism as the dominant religion in America. In Locke's essay, as well as his work titled The Reasonableness of Christianity, Locke made contributions to modern theology by discussing the nature of faith and reason, as well as offering perspectives on the requirements for salvation. His advocacy of rational religion was taken up by many deists, including James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Paine, Abraham Lincoln, and Albert Einstein, among others. Locke is seen as an inspiration for the deist movement. In the following years, Locke's collection of thoughts on education, titled Some Thoughts Concerning Education, was published. Within this book, Locke asserted a wide array of principles concerning academic education, the role of parents in education, and crucial developments to an individual's maturity, which were forward-looking for his time. His years spent as an instructor at Oxford, as well as a tutor for wealthy families, gave Locke the adequate experience to make his calls for reform legitimate. He pushed for a more modern educational system, free of corporal punishment and rote memorization, where the teaching of practical knowledge and strong moral foundations were paramount. He also foreshadowed the modern educational system by allowing children self-direction in their course of study and the ability to pursue their own interests. It was not long after Locke's time that the educational system gradually changed into something akin to Locke's philosophy. Today, schools in America allow students to decide a portion of their curriculum, involve more practical learning, and are free of corporal punishment. Locke was the first to pronounce these ideas on a large scale, giving him a share of the credit for making the American educational system what it is today. As the most influential philosopher of modern times, Locke began his long list of works in philosophy at Oxford University, which would later lead to important reforms in law and government. His accounts of personal identity, language's role in society, the origins of thought, and free will all played a major role in inspiring future studies, as well as sparking scholarly debates within modern philosophy and psychology. All studies of political philosophy are incomplete without John Locke. His work explained the workings of the human mind within politics, as well as within psychology. His contribution to the progress of these two areas is what makes him known as the founder of British empiricism.
Although John Locke died in 1704, his legacy will last as long as America lives on. His profound statements of philosophy sparked revolutionary change within the areas of government, psychology, and theology, changing how we view ourselves and the world around us. His revolutionary influence is also true in a literal sense, as he had an immeasurable impact on those that fought for America's independence. He made an enormous contribution to the event that started American history, the Declaration of Independence. All of the advances in educational theory, government theory, modern philosophy, and psychology that have occurred since his time can be traced back to Locke's influence. As popular as these concepts have become, Locke was the first to articulate these ideas and the one to universalize them. His contributions to modern society made him extremely important to American history.